Are you new to hiking, or do you want to get into hiking but don't know where to start? Well, I've recently been viewing my oldest videos and I noticed that their production quality is a bit lacking, and that's being charitable, but the information in them I think was good. So I'm updating the series on equipment, planning, and trail routine with an emphasis on what a new hiker needs to know, especially if you're a new hiker and you're retired age like I am. So I'm going to start with equipment weight. Stay tuned. So why should we worry about weight when we're out on the trail? Well, I have this definition of hiking, and it's hiking is equal to walking plus carrying. And the more walking you do and the less carrying you do, the more enjoyable it is, at least to me. So here's a statement which is possibly controversial, but only because people will ignore the first part. And that is, all other things being equal, lighter weight is better. And here's the corollary to that, which is all other things are never equal. And that's why I think this shouldn't be a controversial statement, because I've got that caveat in there. But why is lighter better? Well, less wear and tear on your body, and when you're 65 like I am, on Medicare, I want to have a lot less wear and tear on my body. Secondly, you can carry more function per pound, so we'll keep those things in mind. So when it comes to weight, a lot of things are trade-offs. Like I said, all other things being equal, and they're never equal. So here's some example of those other things. First, there's cost. Super lightweight equipment is usually very expensive. Not always, but it's usually very expensive, and probably more expensive than a new hiker really wants to get into. Doesn't mean that you can't make some good choices and some lighter choices, but for example, my tent, I happen to use a tent, I do own a hammock also, but my tent weighs about 1.5 pounds, which is really kind of phenomenal for all the functionality I get out of it. It is a 2-person tent at 1.5 pounds. And I was bragging to my son, whose trail name is Stumbledore, about that. I said, hey, my tent only weighs 1.5 pounds. And he says, no, Dad, it actually weighs $600. And he makes a really good point. Now, I've been hiking enough and I use it enough that for me, that $600 is worth it. But if you're just starting out at hiking, well, it might not be. Another thing that's probably not equal is function. I have 2 different camp stoves, and one of them is lighter than the other, but the functionality is different. And when I talk about stoves, we'll talk about that. But there's a trade-off there, because for a shorter trip, one of my stoves is more weight efficient. For the longer trips, because of the weight of the fuel, the other one is more weight efficient. Quality works into it. A lot of times, lighter weight equipment is lighter weight because it's lower quality. Sometimes, though, that lower quality doesn't make a really pertinent difference to what you need it for. And I'll give an example of that when I get into cookware. Sturdiness, well, that's sort of a quality issue, but a lot of times something that's super lightweight may just not hold up as well. And then there's the interplay among elements. I saw an article, I think it was on Wikipedia, and it said you should strive to minimize the weight of every single piece of equipment. Well, if you take that approach and look at the equipment in isolation, you might say, well, the tent weighs less than the hammock, so therefore I'll use the tent and now worry about the next piece of equipment. But one of the things that happens is, yeah, my hammock weighs more than my tent, but I have to bring different sleeping gear with my hammock, which happens to be lighter. So that's a trade-off there. I happen to use a tent. I have used a hammock in the past, but you've got to add up everything together and then figure out, is it light enough or could you make it lighter? So everything is a trade-off. And my equipment choices reflect my trade-off decisions. Now, I'm just using these as examples in this series so you, as a new hiker, can look at the sorts of things that you have to consider. It's not going to be product recommendations per se. I'm not going to tell you, oh, you should buy what I happen to use. Might not be appropriate for you. So we have this concept of the big 3. And the big 3 are your pack. You have to have a pack. Well, you could go out on the trail with absolutely nothing, and your hikes would be very short that way. So your pack is one item. Your shelter, whether it's a tent or a hammock or even a tarp or a bivy sack or whatever you're using for shelter, You really ought to be bringing shelter with you. If you depend on the on-trail shelters, you could get locked out of them or find yourself in a position where you can't get to a shelter. So you really have to bring portable shelter with you. And your sleep system, because it's not just a sleeping bag, it's a sleeping pad. If you happen to use a pillow, anything like that. So these big 3 things, if you can minimize those and keep them under 8 pounds, the rest will take care of themselves. So in my case, my big 3 weigh under 6 pounds. So in this series, we're going to go over all of that. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all that stuff that you do for a YouTube channel so you always know when I've posted something new. And in this series, like I said, we're going to go over for a beginner what all the things that you need to consider are. Thanks for listening.